So Islam Makhachev defeated Alexander Volkanovski in the main event at UFC 294 this past weekend. A huge head kick followed by some ground and pound ended the Aussie's second bid to become a two-division champ. Makhachev was brilliant during the short time that he was in the octagon. Is it time to start putting some respect on his name, or can one still have reservations about putting him in the convo of the all-time lightweight greats? Look, on the one hand, he's 25-1. 14-1 in the UFC, with a 13-fight win streak and finishes in 6 of his last 7. But he's also only beaten one top 5 lightweight at the time of the fight, and his 2 title defenses are versus a featherweight. Is Makhachev the real deal, or is the jury still out? All right, we go to Fada for the first take of the week.
Yeah, he's the real deal. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, the way his title reign has gone so far is not on him, right? I mean, featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski wanted to move up. They gave him that fight. It was a tough fight. He comes and in the rematch, puts him away with a head kick knockout in the first round. Now, listen, I know Alexander Volkanovski stepped in on short notice. He did not have a full camp, so kudos to him for doing that. But I almost felt like Makhachev had to do that because if this fight was close, if this rematch was close, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be like, listen, like he couldn't be a featherweight on short notice, even though we're talking about the number 2 pound for pound fighter. So Makhachev had to have this type of performance, and that's exactly what he did. He's showing off the striking. We know how good his grappling is. Javier Mendez has always raved about how well-rounded he is as a fighter, and he's starting to show that. He knocked down Oliveira before submitting him to claim the vacant title. He stood toe-to-toe with Alexander Volkanovski throughout that fight, and now he knocks him out with a head kick, just showing us more and more of his repertoire in terms of his striking. Didn't even need to land a takedown to win this fight. So, yes, the way his title defenses have gone haven't really been your typical title reign, but he's willing to fight anyone. He was willing to fight Beneil Dariush. He said, give me Gamrot, Poirier, whoever it is. So he's on the track. I know his resume may not look the prettiest to people right now, but in my opinion, he's definitely on track, and I do think he's the real deal.
All right, Nolan King, how about you, man? Real deal, or is the jury still out? And maybe I should point something out, and this might have been my bad here. Should he even be in the lightweight, talk, I guess, is something else I want to add on to your plate.
In terms of the greatest lightweight of all time?
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily go that far yet, but I think we can start having those thoughts that might be something that, I don't know, after a fight, one or two more fights, we might be having conversations about his legacy and comparing him to the all-time greats. But I think like Faris said, what we've seen so far from him has been beyond impressive. I mean, to beat Alexander Volkanovski decisively like he did on Saturday, to be able to go out there and have an all-out war with him in the fight before that. I just think for me, he's showing a lot of dominance in that division. I would like to see, I think when we talk about those legacy, about somebody's legacy, we like to see consistency, title defenses, fighting the best guys in the division and beating them over and over and over again. So we have really just a small sample size when it comes to the real title sort of elite competition for Islam Makhachev. But from what we've seen, I think that, I mean, there's no way I could say that he's not the real deal. So whether he fights Charles Oliveira next, whether he fights Justin Gaethje next, I think that once he starts knocking down more and more contenders or the guys that we think are the number one besides him, that's when we can start having those conversations. It's just the quality we've seen is there, but we just need the quantity to match up as well.
All right, fair. 2 real deals. How about you guys? Jury still out or real deal, unanimous?
I mean, I think it all just comes down to what you consider the real deal. And I think what we're all talking about is just his stature amongst that division. He definitely warrants your respect. There's no way around that. But if we're going to start mentioning his name around all the greats, I think we're pretty far from that. And it's because of the title defense. They're both against a featherweight, right? So, look, let's be honest. He's probably going to get there. We're not doubting that. But it just doesn't hold weight right now amongst this division. And I think that's what everybody's talking about, right? What's he going to look like against some of these other guys? And we need to know that sooner than later. He doesn't fight that often. I want to see him fight. I want to see him be challenged. I mean, he was the bigger guy in this fight. He's supposed to win. He's not supposed to just win. He's supposed to go out there and dismantle his opponent. He was able to do that in this fight. So I think it's going to come around for Islam Makhachev, but I think when we really know that he's great, it's going to be because he's beating guys like Justin Gaethje, because he's beating a Michael Chandler, a Dustin Poirier, people who have proved to be tough outs within that division. I think that's what's going to propel him to being great.
All right. Don, go ahead, Fado.
Yeah, I just want to add something good. Goes was talking about Islam's activity. They wanted him on that Abu Dhabi card. They wanted him to headline. He was down to fight earlier, but I think for them, he just made he was a home run in terms of a main event for Abu Dhabi. So I think the activity part isn't entirely his fault. But yeah, I get it. You know, a lot of the talk may be premature, but I just think he deserves credit for just literally being like, give me anybody. He has been willing to fight anybody.
Mm-hmm. All right, Don Piccolo, shout out to him, and Ashcon916. We have a chat that accompanies the show. It's on Facebook or on YouTube, and I try to read them all. The better the comment, the better the question, the more likely it is to be included in the show. Me Diamond 44 says, my biggest takeaway from UFC 294 is that neither Makhachev or Chimaev did anything to raise their stock. Both fighting guys from a lower weight class on late notice. Interesting. All right, Joseph Boza says, I think Islam needs to get 2 or 3 more title defenses before he can become an all-time great. Fitness Ninja says, no GOAT talk yet for Islam. He needs more title defenses. Brett M disagrees with, I believe, Me Diamond. He says, Islam did raise his stock. Hamzat didn't. I think we all feel like he is the real deal, guys. But yeah, it's a little too early for the GOAT lightweight talk or Mount Rushmore lightweight talk, whatever it is. But he sure is smashing whoever he's facing, so we got to give him props there. All right, how about this? His next opponent. I think the two guys that are in the running have, compelling arguments. Oliveira, former champ, was scheduled to fight Islam Makhachev at UFC 294. Gaethje, BMF, and he's a fresh matchup. In which direction do you think he should go? Fada, back to you.
It's tough for me because listen, the fight was Oliveira's and he had to withdraw from a cut, so not entirely his fault. Yes, he shouldn't be sparring that hard, yada yada yada. But at the end of the day, when you look at Charles Oliveira's resume, his recent wins, he beat Beneil Dariush, snapped his winning streak, the guy that was supposed to fight for the title, and then he has a very recent win over Justin Gaethje, a finish, a very recent win over Dustin Poirier, a finish. So when you look at it like that, it makes sense. My only issue is because Islam beat him quite definitively, and it wasn't too long ago. Like with the whole Volkanovski rematch, the first fight was close. Some people thought Volk won. I scored it for Islam, but some people thought Volk won. And then, okay, there were some question marks in terms of the rematch. But for Charles Oliveira, the first fight was pretty dominant. It was kind of, so that's why people didn't have too much of an appetite to see the rematch. And I'll tell you, like when they announced the Islam and Oliveira main event, there weren't too many people in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, that were too excited about it. When the card got shuffled, the amount of people that asked me for tickets and were like, had we known that the card was going to be like that, we would have showed up to the fight. So that kind of speaks to how people probably weren't too excited about the fight simply because of the way the first fight went. Now, I would always watch a Charles Oliveira fight regardless, but with Justin Gaethje, I get it. I mean, the win over Dustin Poirier was extremely impressive to knock him out in that fashion. So I'm not against him getting a title fight, but it's, I guess, because they had Oliveira scheduled initially, I think it would be a little unfair if they just pushed him to the side.
All right, and good to know. Next October, I might be headed that way. I didn't know Fada was slinging tickets. Put me down for ringside. All right, Nolan King, how about you, man? Which way do you lean?
It's tough because I agree with Farah. I think like seeing a fresh matchup, like I talked about, divisional dominance over time and knocking off all these sort of names and contenders is pretty big. But at the same time, I kind of hate when an injury seemingly like punishes a guy. Like, Charles Oliveira had that slot and then he got cut, like a laceration, not his fault. So for him to kind of like lose out on that opportunity, I never necessarily like when that happens. Like we've seen recently with Dricus du Plessis, kind of that, the UFC using an injury against him. So I guess really this is going to sound like a cop-out answer, but either way you go, you can't really go wrong. You either get that fresh matchup against, any Justin Gaethje fight, sign me up for, right? Or you get the Charles Oliveira fight again. So for me, it's 50-50. If I had to lean, I would just say kind of get the Charles thing over with. But I'm not going to complain no matter which road the UFC goes down.
However, Nolan, what if Charles wins? Now we got the trilogy. Now Gaethje has to wait. You know what I mean? What do you think?
Yeah. That's what happens now in MMA with all these rematches, right? So, I guess the issue, in my opinion, the issue has already been established, which is that they booked this rematch to begin with, and now it feels like you kind of have unfinished business when we already saw it once. So, I mean, a trilogy would be nothing new that we haven't seen before, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, goes Ahora tú.
It should be Oliveira's shot, right? I mean, aren't we always championing for what should be? But I mean, these guys make good points, and I think as a fan of the sport, and not just that, guys, like if you're a champion, I think one thing you do want to avoid are a lot of rematches and immediate rematches. You just had one with Volk. This would be another one. That doesn't do well when people are trying to figure out who you are, what legacy you're going to establish. It kind of slows you down a little bit. So I think the Justin Gaethje fight actually does more for Makhachev. But in this case, if you want to talk about what's right, it was Oliveira's. It just wasn't his because of a cut. So it should be his again. But we see how the UFC sometimes can be swayed, and I have a feeling they will be on this one. I think it'll be Justin Gaethje.